sweet like a buttercup. You're a Barbie doll. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall. Won't stop till I get enough.
All right, so get this. A trade just went down in the NHL. It's huge GE, and it has the potential to reshape the entire league. We're talking a 3-team deal, big names on the move. And it all happened just moments ago.
Wow.
It's January 25th, 2025. Consider this your rapid response deep dive into what might be the biggest trade of this season.
Definitely a blockbuster.
We're talking Carolina Hurricanes, Colorado Avalanche, and the Chicago Blackhawks, all making moves. So we need to unpack who went where, why it matters, and what it means for these teams going forward.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is that each of these teams seems to be operating on a completely different timeline and with different goals in mind. This isn't just a simple swap of players, you know. This trade has the potential to impact the league for years to come.
Okay, so let's drop the puck and start with the bombshell.
Ah.
Mikko Rantanen, the star winger for the Colorado Avalanche, is reportedly on his way to the Carolina Hurricanes.
Huge get for them. Yeah, and we're not talking about a minor upgrade here. Rantanen is a force. He's currently sitting 6th in the NHL in points, with 64 in just 49 games. This guy can score.
He's a beast.
Oh, yeah. And, you know, he was a key part of the Avalanche's Stanley Cup win back in 2022, formed an almost unstoppable duo with Nathan MacKinnon.
Oh, yeah. That was something else. But here's where things get even more interesting. This isn't a one-for-one trade. The Carolina Hurricanes are also bringing in Taylor Hall from the Chicago Blackhawks, and it's all part of this massive 3-team deal.
Exactly. And just to be clear, this trade hasn't been officially confirmed by the league yet, but all the reputable sources are reporting it as basically a done deal. So let's break down where everyone is going. The Hurricanes land Rantanen from Colorado and Hall from Chicago. The Avalanche get Martin Necas and Jack Drury both from Carolina. And the Blackhawks, well, they get a 3rd-round draft pick from Carolina. And most importantly for them, a whole lot of salary cap relief.
So much to unpack here, but before we get into the nitty-gritty of why each team made this move, let's talk about Rantanen heading to Carolina. Why is this such a big deal for them?
Well beyond his obvious talent and scoring prowess, there's another layer to this that's fascinating. Rantanen's contract. He's on an expiring deal.
So Carolina is rolling the dice here, potentially only having him for this season, unless they can lock him down with an extension.
You got it. It's a high-stakes gamble. Are they pushing all their chips in for a cup run this year, knowing they might lose him in the offseason?
Talk about pressure. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Now, what about Colorado? Trading away a star like Rantanen is a gutsy move. Even if they're getting some solid players in return, tell us more about who they're getting.
Okay, so let's start with Martin Necas. He's a young, talented center who was having a good season for Carolina. He actually just signed a 2-year extension. So Colorado has him locked in for a bit. They're also getting Jack Drury, another center, adding depth to their roster.
Okay.
But the question is, does this move signal a long-term strategy shift for Colorado?
Are they rebuilding? Retooling? What's the plan here?
Well, that's what makes this trade so intriguing. It's almost as if each team is playing a different game. Carolina is clearly going all in for the present. While Colorado's motives are a bit more ambiguous, are they content to remain competitive but not necessarily dominant? Are they setting themselves up for a future built around their younger core? This trade raises more questions than it answers, at least for Colorado.
Now let's shift gears and look at the Chicago Blackhawks. They seem to be in a completely different position from the other two teams.
Right. Chicago is in a rebuilding phase. They're not competing for a cup this year. So their involvement in this trade is more about the future than the present. They're looking to create financial flexibility and acquire assets for the long term.
So getting rid of Taylor Hall's contract was a key part of that for them. It seems like Colorado is even chipping in to cover some of Rantanen's salary, which frees up even more cap space for Chicago.
Exactly. They're essentially taking on some short-term pain for long-term gain. Now let's talk about Taylor Hall himself.
Yeah, he's a fascinating piece of this puzzle. I mean, we're talking about a guy who won the Hart Trophy as league MVP back in 2018. And now he was playing on Chicago's 4th line this season. What happened there?
It's been a bit of a fall from grace for Hall. You know, he signed a big deal with Boston in 2021. And it just hasn't quite worked out. He hasn't been able to consistently replicate that MVP caliber play.
So is he a good fit for Carolina? Where does he even slot into their lineup?
That's the big question, isn't it? He's clearly a talented player, but he's been inconsistent. Carolina might be hoping a change of scenery, and maybe a chance to play alongside some of their top-tier talent could reignite his game.
It's almost like they're hoping to catch lightning in a bottle with Hall. A high-risk, a potentially high-reward situation. So we've got Carolina going all in, Colorado's plans shrouded in mystery, and Chicago playing the long game. This trade is already raising a ton of questions about the future of these teams and the league itself.
And we're just getting started. This trade has implications that reach far beyond these three teams. We need to discuss how this affects the balance of power in both conferences, what this tells us about the current state of the NHL, and what other moves we might see in the coming weeks and months.
We've got a lot more to cover, so let's take a quick break and then dive even deeper into the fallout of this blockbuster trade after the break. All right, so we're back. And as we're diving deeper into this trade, it's becoming clear that we're not just talking about player movement. This trade feels like a microcosm of the different strategies teams are employing in the NHL right now.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Right.
It's fascinating, isn't it? You've got Carolina, a team clearly built to win now, going all in with this move. They're adding a proven scorer in Rantanen and taking a gamble on Hall's potential resurgence, all with the goal of hoisting the Stanley Cup this season.
Yep. And then you have Colorado, a team that just won the Cup a couple of years ago, making a move that suggests they might be looking further down the road, bringing in younger players and creating flexibility for the future.
Which raises the question, are we seeing the end of the dynasty era in the NHL? I mean, the salary cap has made it incredibly difficult for teams to maintain a core of superstars for extended periods. And with the draft lottery system, even the worst teams have a chance to land a franchise-altering talent.
So maybe what we're witnessing is a shift towards a more dynamic league, where teams are constantly cycling through periods of contention and rebuilding.
Exactly. Teams are realizing that windows of opportunity can close quickly, and they're willing to make bold moves to capitalize on them. Just look at what Tampa Bay did, rebuilding through the draft and then becoming a dominant force for several years.
Oh, yeah. The Lightning were a model for that. Or even Colorado itself. They went through a period of mediocrity before assembling the team that won the Cup in 2022. So maybe this trade signifies that they're comfortable cycling back into a retooling phase, trusting their ability to build another contender in a few years.
It's certainly a possibility, and it's a strategy that more teams might be adopting in the future. This trade could be a sign of things to come in the NHL.
Now let's shift our focus back to the players for a minute. We've talked about the big names, but what about Martin Necas and Jack Drury? The players heading to Colorado, how do they fit into the Avalanche's plans?
Well, Necas is the more established player of the two. He's a solid two-way center who can chip in offensively. He could potentially slot into Colorado's top 6 forward group, providing some secondary scoring and playmaking ability.
And he's signed for a couple more years, so he brings some stability to the roster.
Exactly. Now, Drury is more of an unknown quantity. He's a younger player with some potential, but he hasn't really broken through at the NHL level yet. He could provide depth for Colorado, or he might be a trade piece down the line.
Okay, so Colorado gets a mix of proven talent and potential in return for Rantanen. But even with these additions, they've lost a significant offensive weapon.
There's no doubt about that. Rantanen was a huge part of their success, and his absence will be felt. But let's not forget, Colorado still has a very talented core. They've got Nathan MacKinnon, Cale Makar, and a strong supporting cast.
So they're not out of the playoff picture by any means.
Not at all. They're still a contender of the Western Conference. But this trade definitely raises questions about their ceiling in the short term. Can they replace Rantanen's production? Can they adapt their system to compensate for his absence?
These are questions they'll need to answer quickly if they want to compete for another cup. Now let's talk about Carolina and how Rantanen fits into their lineup. They already have some serious firepower with Sebastian Aho and Andrei Svechnikov.
Right, they've got a potent offense already. Adding Rantanen to the mix creates a truly formidable top 6. He could potentially play alongside Aho on the top line, forming a dynamic duo that would be a nightmare for opposing defenses.
Wow. Imagine the scoring potential there. It's almost unfair.
Yeah, but even if they don't play together, Rantanen gives Carolina so much flexibility and depth. They can move him around the lineup, create mismatches, and exploit weaknesses in opposing teams.
It's like they've added a brand new weapon to their arsenal. They're not afraid to use it.
Exactly, and they've also got Taylor Hall in the mix, which adds another layer of intrigue. Can he recapture some of his old magic, playing alongside Carolina's skilled forwards?
That's the big question. If he can even provide secondary scoring consistently, Carolina becomes even more dangerous.
Absolutely. This trade has the potential to elevate Carolina to a whole new level offensively.
And with their strong defensive structure and goaltending, they suddenly look like a legitimate Stanley Cup contender.
There's no doubt about that. This trade has shifted the balance of power in the Eastern Conference, and potentially the entire league.
Now, before we wrap things up, let's not forget about the Chicago Blackhawks. They're the team that, on the surface, seems to have given up the most in this deal. But as we've discussed, they're playing a different game.
Right, they're focused on the long term. They're shedding salary, acquiring draft picks, and creating opportunities for their younger players. It's a classic rebuild strategy.
But rebuilds can be painful for fans. They often involve several seasons of losing before the team becomes competitive again.
That's true. But if done correctly, rebuilds can lead to sustained success down the road. Just look at Tampa Bay and Colorado. They both went through rebuilds before becoming champions.
So there's a light at the end of the tunnel for Blackhawks fans.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it might take some time to get there.
And in the meantime, they'll be watching closely as Rantanen potentially leads Carolina to a Stanley Cup. And Colorado continues to contend in the West. This trade has set the stage for an exciting and unpredictable season in the NHL.
No doubt about it, and we'll be here to break it all down for you every step of the way.
We've covered a lot of ground today, but this is a deep dive after all. So before we wrap things up, we have one final thought-provoking question to explore. This trade has sparked a lot of debate about the current state of the NHL and what it means for the future of the league. So we've talked about the players, the teams involved, and the short-term implications of this trade. But what does this deal tell us about the bigger picture in the NHL? Are we seeing a shift in how teams approach building a Stanley Cup contender?
It's a great question. This trade, with its contrasting approaches from Carolina, Colorado, and Chicago, feels almost symbolic of the current state of the NHL. On one hand, you have teams like Carolina aggressively pursuing immediate success, willing to take risks, and potentially mortgage their future for a shot at the Cup.
So they're essentially saying, we have a window to win now, and we're going to seize it no matter the cost.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, are other teams taking notice? Will we see more general managers adopt this all-in mentality, even if it means sacrificing long-term stability?
It's certainly a possibility. The NHL is an incredibly competitive league, and with the salary cap and the draft lottery system in place, those windows of opportunity can close quickly. Teams might feel the pressure to go for it when they have a chance.
And that's what makes this trade so fascinating. It's not just about the players involved. It's about the underlying philosophies and strategies that teams are employing. It's a microcosm of the constant push and pull between short-term success and long-term sustainability.
So for fans, this trade raises some intriguing questions. Are we entering an era where more teams are willing to go all in for a cup, even if it means potential struggles down the road?
It's certainly a trend worth watching. The parity in the league is undeniable. Any team on any given night can beat another. And that might embolden general managers to take bigger swings, knowing that even a short window of opportunity can be enough to make a deep playoff run.
This trade has injected a level of excitement and unpredictability into the league, and it's going to be fascinating to see how it all plays out.
Absolutely. This is just the beginning of the story. We still have a lot of season left. And who knows what other moves might be on the horizon.
You're right. This trade might just be the first domino to fall, and as fans, all we can do is sit back and enjoy the ride.
Well said. And we'll be here to break it all down for you, exploring the implications and the ripples of this trade throughout the season.
Well, that's all the time we have for our deep dive into this blockbuster NHL trade. We've analyzed the players, the teams, and the broader implications. But as we've learned today, this is a story that's far from over.
So stay tuned as the season unfolds, and we'll see what other surprises the NHL has in store for us.
Until next time, keep your sticks on the ice and your minds in the game.
Sound the alarm. I'm coming up. We'll have a ball. I'm sweet like a buttercup. You're a puppy dog. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall. Won't stop till I